Nigeria, oil-rich, trust-poor. Nigeria hits hard from the first second because it's one of the world's biggest oil producers, yet millions still live without steady electricity or clean water. The country's modern political story really starts in 1960 after independence, followed by military coups through the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Corruption investigations in the 1990s exposed billions in stolen revenue, much of it linked to oil. One of the most shocking moments came in 2012 when protesters filled the streets after fuel subsidy cuts revealed how deeply money had been mismanaged. Today, Nigeria's young population pushes for reform, but old networks remain powerful. The country stays stuck between massive potential and constant political drama. And that sets the tone for what comes next. Haiti, power that keeps changing hands. Haiti stands out because its leadership rarely lasts long enough to build stability. The island has faced political turmoil since the 1804 revolution that freed it from French rule but left it isolated and economically punished. In the 20th century, the Duvalier dictatorship shaped decades of fear and corruption. More recently, the 2010 earthquake destroyed government institutions, and by 2021, the assassination of President Jovenel Moïse showed just how fragile Haitian politics had become. Rival factions, armed groups, and deep poverty keep the country in constant crisis mode. Every election feels like a restart button that never loads. Haiti's leadership vacuum leaves citizens waiting for the stability that never comes. Venezuela, collapse under pressure. Venezuela shocks people because it went from one of Latin America's richest countries to a nation fighting shortages of food, medicine, and electricity. Its modern political tension grew from the early 2000s oil boom, when the government took full control of the industry. When oil prices crashed in 2014, the economy spiraled. Protests in 2017 turned violent, and millions fled the country in one of the largest migrations in the Western Hemisphere. Political battles between government and opposition leaders split the country's institutions. Today, inflation and sanctions keep the pressure on daily life. Venezuela's story shows how fast a resource-rich country can slide when politics lose accountability. Lebanon, a government that can't agree. Lebanon is remarkable because it runs on a political system built around religious groups sharing power, but that system constantly stalls decisions. The roots go back to the French Mandate and a 1943 pact dividing leadership roles among Christian, Sunni, and Shia communities. After the 1975 to 1990 Civil War, corruption and sectarian loyalty became deeply tied to public services. In 2019, protests erupted over new taxes on WhatsApp calls, showing how fed up people were with political elites. Then came the 2020 Beirut port explosion, caused by years of ignored warnings about stored chemicals. Today, the currency keeps collapsing while leaders argue over forming cabinets. Lebanon's political deadlock makes everyday life feel stuck. Zimbabwe, from hope to hyperinflation. Zimbabwe draws attention because it went from being one of Africa's strongest agricultural economies to a country known for trillion-dollar banknotes. After independence in 1980, hopes were high, but political power stayed concentrated, and land reform in the 2000s led to economic disaster. Hyperinflation peaked in 2008 at numbers so high they barely made sense. Protests, contested elections, and internal power struggles followed. Even after a change in leadership in 2017, corruption scandals and economic turmoil continued. Many young Zimbabweans now leave the country for work, searching for the stability their government never delivered. Zimbabwe shows how quickly a nation can unravel when leaders stop listening. Iraq, a system built on fragile deals. Iraq's political instability stands out because the government relies on coalitions that rarely last and parties tied to different militias. After the 2003 U.S. invasion toppled Saddam Hussein, the country tried building a democracy from scratch. Sectarian tensions between Sunni, Shia, and Kurdish groups shaped every election. One major flashpoint came in 2014 when ISIS captured Mosul, exposing how divided and unprepared the state was. Massive protests in 2019 targeted corruption, unemployment, and foreign influence, and security forces responded harshly. Even today, forming a government can take months, Iraq's politics remain a balancing act that constantly threatens to collapse. Afghanistan, politics in permanent survival mode. Afghanistan is unforgettable because its governments never had long periods of stability. From the Soviet invasion in 1979 to the rise of the Taliban in the 90s, the country has lived through non-stop conflict. After 2001, international forces helped build a new government, but corruption, insecurity, and uneven development weakened it. In 2021, the Taliban retook Kabul in a matter of days, after years of insurgency and failed peace talks. Thousands rushed to the airport in chaotic evacuation scenes broadcast worldwide. Today, the country faces economic isolation, restricted rights, and internal tensions. Afghanistan's politics are defined by survival, not progress. Russia, power concentrated at the top. Russia makes the list because its political system revolves around centralized power that has tightened since the early 2000s. After the chaotic 1990s, the government rebuilt control over media, courts, and major industries. Elections continued, but opposition leaders were restricted, sidelined, or arrested. The 2014 annexation of Crimea sparked global tensions, and the 2022 invasion of Ukraine triggered sanctions that hit the economy hard. Critics say corruption and oligarch networks shape major decisions. Today, political dissent inside the country is limited, and the government pushes a narrative of stability over freedom. Russia's politics affect not just its citizens, but the world stage. Myanmar, democracy, interrupted. Myanmar stands out because every time it gets close to democracy, the military steps back in. After decades of military rule, reforms in 2011 brought elections and hope. But in February 2021, the military staged another coup, claiming election fraud. Massive protests filled cities, and security forces cracked down, leading to thousands of arrests and clashes. Ethnic conflicts in states like Rakhine, Kachin, and Shan stretch back decades, making the political map even more complicated. Today, armed resistance movements challenge the military nationwide. Myanmar remains caught between its people's desire for freedom and leaders who refuse to let go of power. South Africa, corruption that shocked a nation. South Africa shocks many because it had one of the world's most inspiring political transitions in the 1990s, yet later faced huge corruption scandals. After apartheid ended, the government tried to expand services fast. But between 2009 and 2018, allegations of state capture exposed how private companies influenced public decisions. The electricity company Eskom became a symbol of mismanagement, leading to nationwide power cuts known as load shedding. Protests over unemployment and inequality continue across cities like Johannesburg and Durban. Even with ongoing investigations, rebuilding trust in public institutions remains slow. South Africa shows how corruption can threaten even a strong democracy. Pakistan, leaders falling like dominoes. Pakistan is striking because no prime minister has ever finished a full 5-year term. Since independence in 1947, the country has bounced between civilian governments and military influence. Political parties often clash, and corruption cases frequently dominate headlines. In 2007, the assassination of former Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto shocked the world and deepened political divides. In 2022, a prime minister was removed through a no-confidence vote, and street protests erupted. Economic struggles, IMF loans, and power shortages make things even harder. Pakistan's politics feel like a repeating cycle where leaders rise fast and fall even faster. North Korea, a state built on control. North Korea is one of the world's most closed political systems, ruled by the same family since 1948. After the Korean War, the government built a security-heavy state that controls almost every part of life. Famine in the 1990s killed hundreds of thousands, yet leadership stayed untouched. Missile tests in 2017 and 2023 raised global alarms, and strict borders keep citizens isolated. Information is tightly controlled, and government loyalty determines survival. The country remains locked in a Cold War-style standoff with much of the world. North Korea's politics show what happens when power never changes hands. Libya, a country with too many governments. Libya stands out because since 2011, it has often had two rival governments at the same time. After the fall of Muammar Gaddafi, militias filled the power gap, each claiming control over territory. In 2014, a second parliament formed, splitting the country. Battles for cities like Benghazi and Tripoli dragged on for years, and foreign powers backed different sides. The 2020 ceasefire slowed the violence, but elections keep getting delayed. Oil fields shut down or switched hands depending on which group held power. Libya's politics remain a battlefield where leadership changes by force, not by vote. Sudan, military politics in endless loops. Sudan makes the list because its political story repeats the same pattern: military rule, uprising, and then another takeover. The country split in 2011 when South Sudan became independent after decades of conflict. In 2019, massive protests removed a long-time leader, but in 2021, the military staged another coup. Fighting in 2023 between two armed factions turned cities like Khartoum into war zones, forcing millions to flee. The country's gold industry, foreign influence, and old rivalries fuel the chaos. Sudan's politics show how hard it is to build a stable government when the military never steps back. Somalia, leaders without a state. Somalia's political chaos stands out because the central government collapsed in 1991, and rebuilding has been slow ever since. Clan rivalries, warlords, and the rise of the extremist group Al-Shabaab shaped the country's modern history. Droughts and famine made things worse, forcing international aid to become part of daily survival. In the 2010s, elections slowly returned, but they often faced delays and disputes. Mogadishu's government controls only parts of the country, while regions like Somaliland run their own administrations. Somalia's leaders struggle to rebuild a nation that lost its foundation decades ago. Equatorial Guinea, wealth that never reached the people. Equatorial Guinea is startling because it discovered massive offshore oil in the 1990s, yet most citizens still live in poverty. The country has one of the highest GDPs per capita on paper, but wealth is concentrated among a small political elite. Reports from international watchdogs describe missing funds, lavish spending, and limited transparency. Political power has stayed within the same family for decades, leaving little space for change. Infrastructure projects rise across cities like Malabo, but schools, hospitals, and jobs remain scarce for many. Equatorial Guinea ends the list as a clear reminder that money alone can't fix bad governance.